Right, hello everybody. How many people have we got?
Tim raised a hand.
Okay, I'm just going to give it 2 more minutes and then we will get started. Feel free to say hi in the chat as well so I can see that you're there. Yeah, great. Right, welcome everyone. So this is our second webinar in our series, Unlocking the Benefits of QR Codes powered by GS1. So last week, you will have heard from Camilla and Tim talking all things connect to consumer. But this week, we're going to talk all things supply chain efficiency and how offline data attributes can unlock efficiency, visibility, and safety benefits within your business. So just to let you know, we have put the webinar in for an hour, but we're actually going to try and cover everything off in about 30 minutes, so you get some time back. And also, it is being recorded, so if you want to watch it back later or you want to share it with other team members, you can. So let's kick off with some introductions. So hi everyone, my name's Roshni. I'm an engagement manager, and my role at GS1 UK is to help retailers and brands unlock the potential of GS1 standards in their businesses. And I'm very lucky today to be joined by Glenn from a company called Prove Anything. Glenn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, everyone. Thank you for correcting the spelling of Glenn, by the way, there. Appreciate that. My name's Glenn Shoesmith. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Prove Anything, and I'll fill you in a bit more about that in a bit.
Amazing. Right, so before we get into the detail, I'm not sure how many people on the call know exactly who GS1 are, so I thought I'd just do a quick overview of what we do. So we are a neutral, not-for-profit membership organisation, and we create standards that help identify, capture, and share information. And what we mean by standards is basically having a common language that enables information to be easily shared across different systems interoperably. So we're probably most commonly known for the barcode. So fun fact at the bottom there, did you know the barcode is actually scanned over 10 billion times every day across the globe? We're part of a global federation, so there's 118 different MOs across the globe that all use the same GS1 standards. And in the UK alone, we have 60,000 members, of which 76% actually sit within the retail industry. So barcodes have obviously been around for quite a while, over 50 years, and it's crazy to think that in that time they actually haven't changed. Even though like technology has been advancing, they do a really great job, and they've been used in everyday life for quite a while. But something that I learned when I joined GS1 was they actually only hold one piece of information, which is the GTIN, the global trade item number. And what we know as a business is that data needs are changing. As we move into this increasingly digital environment, we do need those barcodes to work a little bit harder. So GS1 have launched a program to transition us from the barcode that you see today to QR codes powered by GS1. So you might have heard the date 2027 being mentioned in the media, on other kind of like GS1 sites. I think a lot of people think that means like the barcode's going to be gone by 2027, but we don't believe that it's not going to have a use. There's going to be certain cases where it's still going to do its job. But what we are saying is that we do think there's going to be a phase transition where people will start to move to these QR codes. And by 2027, there will be kind of a critical mass where lots of retailers will be scanning them over barcodes at POS. And as you can imagine, that's also going to vary by market. So QR codes aren't compulsory at the moment, and we kind of expect, along with the retailer transition and the benefits that they see in having that additional data, there's also going to be big regulatory requirements that are coming into play that are going to drive that switch over to the QR codes powered by GS1. So let's think of some of the scenarios where that additional data could really help. I'm sure in business we ask ourselves a lot of these questions all the time, like, what if I had more of this so I could do this? So, imagine if I could see how much stock I have on a specific batch of products in a certain store. Or imagine if I could quickly see, if this product in this batch was part of a recall and I could get it off the shelves in like, an hour instead of having 24 hours and having to get the whole SKU removed. A lot of these things QR codes powered by GS1 can really help with and unlock those benefits and efficiencies within the supply chain. So there's a whole host of different use cases that the QR codes powered by GS1 can unlock. In the last webinar, you will have seen all the ones kind of on the right, which were all about connecting to consumer and giving them more information. But today, Glenn's really going to talk about how embedding those additional bits of information into something called the digital link can unlock benefits like traceability, waste reduction, authentication, and automatic recalls. So how does it all work? The QR code is nothing new, it's really funny because I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, thank God for COVID because they kept it alive because, at one point we thought it was going to vanish. But, we all know how to scan them now. And I think that's really important because actually we see it as an additional data carrier. But the beauty of the GS1 powered QR code is the actual information behind the QR code that's powered by something called the GS1 digital link standard. So you'll see that kind of URL at the bottom there, and that's what it is. And essentially, it's a web URL with a GTIN embedded into it. But not only can you embed that GTIN, so that unique identifier for the product, you can also embed other bits of data. So we call them application identifiers. So you can add things like expiry dates, batch numbers, country of origin. There's over 100 different attributes, and that list is growing of things that you can embed into it. And then the other powerful thing that you can do is you can then link to GS1 Resolver, which can direct that QR code to multiple online data sources. So things like product information, recycling information, certifications. And then lastly, the best thing about it is it goes beep at the till. So the future is, instead of having, multiple codes on pack, where you've got barcode, data matrix, QR code, you can hold all of that information into one code. And that's what we see as a vision for the future. So there are a couple of caveats that I wanted to call out when you're thinking about implementing QR codes with additional offline data. So the first one is, because the information is going to be changing on the QR code, they will be needed to be printed on the production line, which will mean the data will change as the QR code changes. There are also 4 different kind of variables that you'll need to consider. So what's your product category? The second one is like, how are you creating your QR code and where does it go on the artwork? The third one is speed. So, you might be printing 300 labels in a minute at the moment. You want to be able to achieve that same speed. And the last one is software integration. So the data is only as good as the software that can read it. So making sure that you think of those 4 things as you explore QR codes with additional data is really important. And the one thing that we would say is, if you can see the benefits, the first thing you should really do is go and speak to your printer company and just understand what the implications would be to your production line. And then I just wanted to finish off by saying, just looking into this now is gonna really help you in the future. So one, it's gonna future-proof yourself. So when the transition does happen, you're ready, you kind of know what needs to happen. And 2, which Glenn is probably going to talk about as well, it will give you that competitive advantage. So we can see that the retailers really see the benefits in these QR codes. So if you can future-proof yourself and give yourself that advantage by being able to print them, it can really help you with your business in the future. So that's everything from me. I'm now going to pass on to Glenn, who's going to really bring to life some of those use cases that I mentioned.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Roshni. Yes, and hopefully I can bring a bit of color, context, and a bit more detail, deep dive into some of the opportunities and the advantages here. But let me take a very quick step back and actually explain where I'm from. So, as I said, my name's Glenn Shoesmith, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Prove Anything. We have a platform that we call Smart Links. And what we do is, obviously, we work with GS1 on the digital link and the implementation of the digital link standard and the resolver, which I'll explain a little bit more on. What we do is we really go beyond that to create a digital twin. We create an entire digital record of your items, and we can feed that information in from your PIMs or other platforms to basically present that information. It's about connecting between a physical to digital world of all kinds of products, and we can help curate and present information about that product. So that product can be exactly as Roshni showed in that slide. It can be, you know, the origin information, the provenance and information. And that's a key part of the supply chain, is to tell the story of your items. But it's also the allergy information, the, you know, ingredient information, as well as obviously the marketing and engagement tools. And I'll talk a bit more about later about how they can help you in your supply chain as well. But what I really love about the GS1 digital link is, you know, when we started building our platform, it's all about how do you connect the two together. And you see QR codes on everything. And, you know, I hesitate to say, you know, thank you to COVID, but I do get Roshni's sentiment that actually multi-language, everybody sees a QR code, knows what to do with it nowadays, which is fantastic. But so many QR codes, you scan them and it's actually really just, it's just for the shipping guy, or it's just for the staff, or it's just an identifier. And this idea of having a standard where that standard can bring together a QR code that can be scanned by the customer and present customer information. It can be scanned by the staff, and you know, you can gatekeep it so that it only presents specific staff information when you want to. And of course, it can be read by machines. And this is a really powerful point, and there's two obviously benefits here. So one is obviously, as Roshni talked about, the ability for it to be read offline in a sense. The data is in the URL. The key data, your machine, your point of sale, for example, or maybe part of a warehouse machine needs, is actually doesn't need to connect to the internet. But equally, it could be read by an app or some other tool set that does then use the internet connection. And this, I think, is one of the key things that people forget, is they go, well, it's just a QR code, right? It can link to anything. Can I make it point to my website? And this is where the resolver, which I think is still a bit of a black art within GS1, is really, really powerful, because it standardizes where the QR code goes. So different apps and different tools can scan that QR code and go, I want the product information, the allergy information, the nutrition information, all kinds of different things. Next up. And actually, we use the GS1 digital link for all kinds of different things, right? So the focus right now is very much for FMCG, right? Food, drink, medicine, you know, fashion items. The story right now is very much about communicating information to the customer and explaining origins and stories. But actually, every product has a barcode, right? And when you talk about things like EU digital passport, digital product passports, you know, the origin stories, the traceability, the environmental impacts, the carbon footprint of particularly things like electronics and all kinds of goods and clothing is going to come at you very quickly. So no matter what kind of manufacturer you are, no matter what kind of retailer you are, the GS1 digital link and the resolver are going to help you communicate these details and meet future legislation. And obviously companies like ours, other companies also exist, I should say, are all there to help you in that process. So, but however, here today, we're really to talk about how and why you should put more information than just the GTIN in the digital link, because it is a very, very flexible standard, which is fantastic. And the more data you can put in, the more useful it becomes across different use cases, across your supply chain. And here, when I refer to your supply chain, I'm really talking post-manufacturer all the way through to it getting into the consumer's hands. So let's start with one of the scary things. And this is obviously one of the things that no manufacturer or retailer ever wants to be on the, you know, BBC or any other, news outlet for. And this is recalls. And obviously recalls are a bigger and bigger thing as supply chains get bigger and broader and manufacturing gets more streamlined. There's always that risk of contamination, of incorrect product ingredients. And they say it is sometimes it's a recall due to a contamination, or I think there's a massive one at the moment going on in America over listeria in ice cream, where they're recalling millions and millions of gallons of ice cream because of some listeria outbreak. And this is going to be a problem. This is always going to be a problem. And it's also a problem for things like cross-contamination. Maybe there were nuts that you didn't know about, so all of your packaging is out of date. So how can this help with that? Well, let's look through a journey. Let's look through the different kind of steps that happen at the moment. So if you've ever seen all of those news articles, you can literally look at every single one of those news articles, you know, that I posted, and everyone has the same story in it. It says, you should be looking for products with an expiry date of blah, 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 or a batch number of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you've got to find that on the product. You've got to be able to identify it. You've got to remember it. And it's a nightmare, both for the staff, for the manufacturers, for the retailers, and obviously the customers, to even identify if the product they had has a recall alert on it. So what they'll end up doing is just chucking it away, right? And it's bad for them. They're unhappy with you as a brand, and it looks bad. So you've got a real commercial interest in narrowing down as much as possible any issues with your product. And that's where, if you put the batch number and the expiry date onto the QR code, you can actually identify that much earlier. So it can start with the staff in the shelves. The staff in the shelves can scan the QR codes very quickly and easily and recall entire boxes or batches of items straight off the shelf. The checkouts could be updated to identify a recalled item and refuse to even sell it. So if somehow you haven't had the chance to take an item off a shelf, actually the checkout itself can be the first gated item. Of course, if the customer becomes aware of the recall, they can scan the QR code and it can clearly be labeled up as safe or not safe, and then give them steps and instructions on how to deal with that, how to get a refund, where to take it back to. And this one isn't done yet. And I really like this whole end-to-end journey. And I think this is where the future is, right? Which is, a lot of us today shop with a loyalty card, right? Or an online shop or wherever. But essentially, if that shopping was all tagged with batch numbers and expiry dates at the point of checkout, the retailer actually knows. They don't just know a bottle of ketchup, they know exactly the batch and expiry date of that bottle of ketchup you bought. And as a result, if there happens to be a recall notice on that, they can chain that through all the way through to an alert directly issued to the customer that actually says, by the way, I know you bought this product and I'm telling you specifically that there is a recall on that product. And that, at that point, will absolutely help save lives and optimize the recall process. Thanks. So what other challenges are there? What else can the GS1 digital link really help you solve? And this is the one where this is really being brought to life at the moment. And I think this is one of the strongest reasons that some companies, we've got some examples where people are really saving money doing this. And this is around food wastage. You know, one of the biggest problems you see is obviously, you know, out-of-date food. My local supermarket, for example, is quite small and has a massive problem where there's so much of their stuff has to be discounted. But clearly, at the same time, they like to keep the shelves looking full. So how do you deal with this problem of wanting to have full shelves, but stuff expiring on the shelves? So any of you that's a retailer on the call, and I myself have stacked shelves in Sainsbury's in a long and distant past, thankfully quite a few years ago now. But you know that you have to identify which products on your shelf and how long they're going to expire, because obviously all of us go and find the milk, find the cheese with the longest expiry date and ignore the ones that are going to expire in a few days' time. So at the till, you've no idea what you've sold. You've no idea what's on your shelf. And I spoke to a big supermarket about this, and they said right now they have to have staff check every product on all their short shelf life items every night to make sure they're still fresh and make sure they're ordering the right products in to make sure they've got products on the shelves. And they have a huge amount of either staff wastage, over ordering, or either empty shelves due to the challenge of not knowing the expiry of what's on the shelves. So this is again where putting the batch numbers and putting the expiry dates directly on the products really, really helps you. And actually, the interesting thing about the GS1 digital link standard, I have read the 45-page, very technical digital link standard document so that you don't have to. It's not just the expiry date, right? And I know there's a backlash against expiry dates, you know, where people are over panicking about them from the consumer side. And it's obviously a different story, what you have to manage as a retailer on an expiry date against what's recommended for a consumer. But actually, the GS1 standard supports a whole variety of different dates that can be put directly into that QR code. So best before dates, sell by dates, use by dates, expiry dates, test by dates, production dates, due dates, pack dates, first free date, and harvest dates are all available to be put in that code. And all of those can help you track at the checkout if necessary. I wouldn't recommend putting all of them on at the same time. That will get quite a long QR code. But modern printing purposes, as Roshni really touched on, you know, that idea that you can change your printing to be much more on demand, much more last minute, to include that information directly on the QR code is going to help your business. And if you're a manufacturer, and Roshni did slightly steal my thunder here on this one, but if you're a manufacturer and you're supplying a retailer and you're not thinking about this, but your competition is, you're going to find yourself missing out. Because, you know, Woolworths Australia already talk about the fact that they saved 40% in food wastage by knowing exactly what was being bought at the checkout, so that they knew immediately what was left on the shelves and they could manage their reordering better. And if they've got a choice between two suppliers, one supplier who can put QR codes with dates and expiry dates in the QR code and another one that can't, it's obvious which one they're going to buy from. And in the next couple of years, you're going to see a shift from suppliers. They may not enforce you to do it, but they can enforce you with their wallet, and they'll buy from someone else who can manage that supply chain and that expiry better if you don't take the lead in leading with this. So what other use cases are there? So, oh, I've got this slide on real-time discounting. So this is the other use case here. So obviously that final bit of the expiry date changes your discounting, and you get to reduce the amount of discounting. And it was really interesting when finding a nice screenshot for use of this, the amount of press stories about how you can, what time of day to turn up in the supermarket when they've just stickered everything to get the best possible discounts. But the great thing about putting the QR code directly on the product is that the till can then auto discount the product without you having to over sticker it with a reduced label. And obviously right now, for any retailer that has to manually over sticker, print a custom barcode, go around every single item and print it on every single item, you have to put it over the existing barcode. You have to use special paper that's terrible so that people don't peel the sticker off and stick it on a different product and try to get that at the discounted price. It is a complete nightmare. And obviously, you still want to identify to customers what products have been discounted, but you could just move it to a discount shelf. You could just put it under a section of reduced. You could put generic stickers on anywhere on the product that just says 25% off. The process becomes more manageable, more affordable, less open to fraud, and actually just a lot simpler across the board. So what other use cases are there? So obviously, so far, I've really honed in on the retailer's journey at the supermarket, generally sort of the supermarket side of things. But actually, if you're a different kind of retailer, there's all kinds of use cases where putting extra information in your QR code helps. Now, I shouldn't tell GS1 this, but I've spoken to manufacturers where they've ended up using multiple GTINs simply as a method of allowing them to have traceability. What shop they've sold it to, what retailer they've sold it to, what market they've sold it to. They use different GTINs to help them with traceability. Now, the great thing about the digital link is you can massively increase the information on your product in that QR code, right down to every single item. You can put unique, serialized, individual items on every single QR code should you want. And that's fantastic for traceability. So I mentioned briefly marketing, and I know there was a previous webinar on marketing, and this is one of the important things you need to think about, is that you can really bring all your stories together, right? Your QR code you put on your products today that maybe says, scan this to find out about the origins of our product, or scan this to win something in a competition, and it's just a random QR code that your marketing team put on, doesn't actually help you in any way understand your product's journey. But with a GS1 digital link, you can encourage your customers to scan the QR code to create all kinds of engagement stories. But at the same time as them scanning that, obviously you can locate them. You can locate them through the IP address, or you can ask them for their lat long, use the GPS on the phone, obviously with permission, and really understand exactly where the customer is. Now, if that QR code also had a batch number or even a specific item serial number, you can actually trace exactly that product's journey to how it got into the customer's hands. So we do this already. We're doing this with a perfume business where they've got a real problem with grey markets, where they'll ship a bunch of product to a retailer in one market value. And what they're finding, of course, is that someone will move that product over to another market where it's higher priced and sell it over there for a greater margin. Obviously, they won't want that to happen, and they want to shut down that reseller. They want to identify that reseller. And currently, they're doing things like buying them off of eBay to try and attempt to trace where they came from. But of course, by creating consumer engagement, if you suddenly find you've shipped all of a batch of products to one market, but every single consumer scan is in a completely different location, suddenly you can identify exactly if your resellers are moving products across borders without your consent. And this is something that hasn't really been done before. And obviously, it's all about bringing all your different departments together and all your different opportunities together. So I've got one more case study I want to go through, and this is particularly relevant at the moment in wine. And I think it's something that's going to expand, and I really hope is going to expand across other markets and other products over time. This is a bit of a look to the future. And I think there's another webinar more on policy and changing laws. But there's an interesting law that not a lot of people know has come in recently about wine in the EU. And they basically said, and I think it's the French didn't want their wine bottles to be ugly, but they basically said you can now put a QR code on the wine in order to explain information about wine. And in this case, it's specifically origin information, it's nutrition information, it's allergy information, all the DOP side of things, and you can present it all in multiple languages rather than having to print it on the bottle. The EU has basically said the QR code is an acceptable way of communicating critical information on the product on a bottle of wine. And of course, that's not currently true on other products. It's not true on medicine. It's not even true on beer. You know, we've got a client that's a beer company where currently they ship it across Europe. They have to print the entire label in every single language they print in, including the recycling instructions and the best before. And it's a totally tiny, unreadable print. And if they decide to ship to a new country, they obviously have to reprint all the bottles. The EU knows this is a waste. So this, unfortunately, is not a solution for today, but, you know, write to your local MP. I think this is going to help supply chains massively in the future, because when you use a GS1 digital link, it can communicate all of that information in multiple languages in a supply chain agnostic way that really then will allow you in the future to ship everywhere. And back to where Roshni said about getting ahead of the curve. The earlier you get onto putting a QR code on so it can communicate this information, you are ready for the future. You're ready for a changing regulation that allows you to ship more easily, optimize your supply chain, and really get information to your customers in a better way. So really, that's it from me. Hopefully, you know, you've really seen some interesting ways in which the, you know, use of extra information in that QR code can really help bring your product to life and help optimize. And there is this, to reiterate, there's these two things. There's the link itself, the digital link, but then there's the resolver. There's the how does that link then link to real information that's valuable to the customer, that's valuable to the staff, and as I said, also valuable to machines. You know, this whole idea of GS1s, it's a flexible and multi-purpose tool set. It will drive engagement, it will drive revenue growth, it will drive efficiency across your business. And I think if I leave you with one takeaway, you know, from conversations we're having with customers, is that this, for the first time, really requires a multi-departmental approach. So whichever department you're from, you need to be doing this in concert with the other departments, right? It isn't a marketing problem, but marketing is part of it, right? It isn't a distribution problem, but distribution is part of it. Everybody is part of it, from manufacturing to customer engagement. Every single part of your business, this touches in a way, and the better you bring it together, the better value and better efficiency you'll get out of it. Thank you very much. Any questions? You're on mute, Roshni.
Thank you so much, Glenn. So yeah, I hope you all saw on the call that there's lots of different possibilities that the GS1 powered QR code can unlock. So now we're going to go over to some questions and see if there are any in the chat.
I've obviously answered everyone's question.
Yeah. I think just to touch on what Glenn was saying about this doesn't just sit with one department. More and more of the brands and the retailers that we're talking to are establishing mini teams, mini 2D teams that are working on this project, just bringing different people together. And it feels a bit daunting because there's obviously so many different possibilities, but it's then kind of understanding where are we going to get the benefits and really like honing into like certain use cases and trying to run pilots on those use cases, because then you get the tangible results, which then enables you to kind of roll things out further. Okay, so I think we have a question. Does the actual barcode change, or do we change the QR code when batches change on the production line?
So well, the barcode doesn't actually have the batch information in it at the moment. So the current barcode is just your GTIN. The QR code obviously actually is an encoded version of a full URL. right? And that URL has the batch number in it. So, you know, if you wanted to, for efficiency, and obviously for now, sadly, this is the thing where people are struggling to find space, is you really need to print both, right? Eventually, you'll get to drop the barcode, but for now, I think people are talking about printing both, especially when it's not. Obviously, some retailers can just drop the barcode if it's entirely in an internal supply chain. But I think most manufacturers are talking about producing both. So you can pre-print the current barcode on, but then add the QR code. And the QR code will then change everybody, you know, will change on every batch and every expiry, basically the same way as you might currently just stamp on a best before date or a batch number onto your product package.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Glenn's saying, it's then you really need to speak to your software supplier that generates your barcodes to understand the capabilities of creating the, you know, dynamic QR, and then understanding, like I said in that one of the first slides, just speaking to your print production people and understanding what updates would you need to enable you to have that serialized QR printed on pack. Right, I've got another question. Could the QR technology be used to support EU deforestation regulation that is expected to come into force by the end of 2024?
I think the way you need to think about the QR code is a gateway. I mean, sometimes we refer to, particularly, you know, smart links, we refer to it as a product portal or link tree for products. And I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it, right? You're not, it is a whole series of information, right? So you'll end up with, you put the QR code on, this links to the resolver, a UI, a presentation tool set that will then give different links for different things. So some of those will be, you know, allergy links, nutrition links. Some of it will be DPP, you know, all the digital product passport links. Some of it will be, you know, environmental regulation links. So, for example, some of the wine stuff we do at the moment. And the interesting, the wine one's really interesting because the law about presenting information about wine in the EU is really complicated because they do not let you put in any marketing stories. So that marketing side of things, if you put a QR code on your wine, you can't link to marketing information inside the EU unless you then put a second QR code on. So it gets a bit complicated. And I think the EU is still trying to clarify the rules and regulations around that. And some of it's still quite evolving as they work out. You know, they want to push using a QR code to present legal and regulatory information, but then obviously they're worried that that's going to get overplayed at the top by marketing information and sort of more commercial interests. So a lot of this is still evolving, but obviously the good thing about, you know, a good platform, like say Prove Anything, other platforms also exist, is that obviously all of this content is dynamic, can be updated. So you put the QR code on, the content continually evolve to show around changing rules and laws. So I think when you've got things like DPP origins, deforestation laws, and all that kind of stuff, I think you have to accept that put the QR code on, but the content behind the scenes needs to be dynamic and will potentially change as the laws evolve.
Definitely. And just something to flag, we've got a specific webinar on regulation in October. So definitely worth joining that if you want a bit more information. And also as GS1, part of our role is to kind of be in those talks about those regulations and how QR codes can support. Okay, I think we've only got time for one more because we're over time, but this is a good one, Glenn. Do you also support accessible QR codes?
So absolutely, I'm a big believer in them. So we obviously the QR code itself isn't that. I mean, it's sort of, you know, your view of isn't the QR code in itself accessible is obviously a separate question. I'm a big believer that you shouldn't necessarily have to have an app just to be able to scan a QR code and get information. So, for example, on our platform, all of our QR codes load up with WCAG accessibility and work well with screen readers. And we particularly make sure we promote things like allergy alerts to be read first in the screen reader. They shouldn't be like 15 menus down. However, I really love tools like Zapper, where they put extra information around the QR code. So if you do download like their app or other apps, which I know people at Unilever are using, to make it easier to find the QR code at a distance. Because obviously you've got two things. You've got the finding the QR code using dedicated apps, such as Zapper for that. And then obviously you've got how you pull that information back and present it to the customer using screen readers and other tools. But I mean, I think accessibility is actually one of the best reasons. And I also think multi-language is one of the best reasons as well. Like when you're across Europe, the ability for you to read a product in another language, scan it, and get that information in your own language, I think is going to be absolutely paramount. you know, as allergy information becomes more prevalent, I think that's going to be key to present it in a way that is both, and also just readability in general. The packaging at the moment is terrible and needs to change. So no, I'm a big fan and big believer in both multi-language and accessibility, and I think that should be a big driver for companies to help present that information to customers.
Definitely. And another plug for another webinar. We've got an accessibility webinar as well in October, so definitely sign up for that. Right, we're at time now, so I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Glenn for joining us on the call and giving us a real insight into the world of how GS1 powered QR codes can really help you unlock supply chain benefits. Hope everyone on the call found it really beneficial. We've got more topics coming up, more webinars, so definitely sign up for them. I know we were very tight on time today, so if anyone has a burning question that they want answering, we've got a QR specific mailbox now, so it's qr@gs1uk.org. If you ping the questions to that email address, we will aim to get back to you by the end of the week with any answers. And that's it from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, guys. Bye.